Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about programming today, and programming is one of those pieces of the RA position that I think our students generally like to do. And for those who like to do it, there's a couple of reasons why. One is obviously their residents come to them, but two, they understand a few things about programming. These are RAs, that is. Understand a few things about programming and what it is supposed to accomplish. And so we're going to go over that a little bit today, and so that way no matter what building you live in, that programming you can be successful. No matter what building you live in or what temperament you have for programming, you can be successful at programming. And I'm going to give you some good advice about how to approach programming on your floor or in your building. So most of the time when I talk with RAs about programming, they want to know a couple things. One, they want to know, what is a programming? What's Matt Smith's expectations about programming after all, right? And so we're going to go over that. They also want to know, is there something that can guide me through this, or am I just kind of out in the woods with this and trying to figure it out on my own? And I can promise you that there is a guide for that, and we'll go over some of that as well. Next question is, how do I propose one? Right? We'll talk a little bit about this in hopes that RAs understand how the topics for their programs come up on their floors, right? Or how an RA comes to understand that they need a program of that kind of background on their floor. Because it goes hand in hand with the next question, and that is, is it going to be something that my residents are going to come to, right? And I think that's everybody's worry, is that they're going to spend all this time and energy putting on a program and they get like 2 people at the program. Well, I can guarantee you that if by the end of this you take good notes and you practice what I've laid out for you, you'll have more than 2 residents at your program, because it will be something that they're interested in, because it's something that they're going through, right? With that being said, I keep talking about taking notes and thinking, right? Programming, in order to be successful, programming has to be something that you have seen in your hall, on your floor, that has meaning. Yes, there are a certain number of programs that each RA has to do, and I get that. And I know that you're also busy. I get that too. However, in order for programming to be successful on your floor, it has to have meaning. You have to have some passion behind the program that you're putting on. If you do not, then your residents will follow suit. They won't have passion for it either, right? We'll go over getting reimbursed. So once you spend some money, or if you spend some money on your program, how do I get my money back? And we'll go over that. And then certainly, but not least, how does the role the bulletin board plays in programming? Because each one of you has one on your floor, but what's the role that the bulletin board plays in programming? But to understand about the role programming plays, you have to understand that your residence hall that you live in, or the apartment building that you live in, is a community, right? If you set the tone as the RA that this is a community of learners, or a community of people who care about each other, because you as the RA or the apartment liaison or the hall director will care about your residents, then they're going to understand that they live in a place where learning can take place, that caring and concern happens, and that ultimately the community that's there takes care of one another. So what is a program? Well, there's 3, in my mind there's kind of 3 types of programs. The first is a planned program, and this is a program that is designed by you, right? And typically the design comes from what you have witnessed on the floor. Have you seen, a greater need in, have you seen more people hooking up, or coming home from parties, or maybe sleeping in, or getting to class late, or have you heard rumblings about roommate problems, or home problems, or homesickness? All those kinds of things that happen during the course of a year. It's up to you to have your ear to the rail That's why it's so important for you to be around, even when you're not on duty, to be around and be accessible to your residents, to be able to facilitate community, but also understand the problems that are going on in your floor. And from those problems and from those issues and potential learning experiences, those are where your programs stem from, right? They're born from those types of things. The next type of program is passive program, or passive programs. They're still planned, but I think about passive programs like this. You direct planned programs. You facilitate passive programs. A good example of a passive program was the Active Random Kindness program we had a couple years ago, where the RA planned it out as a community-based program to increase community, right? So they put a bunch of cards together that were really nicely printed. They were all hand done for everyone on their floor, and the RA had mailed instructions about what they wanted the residents to do, right? So they were to look at somebody else on their floor, maybe somebody they didn't even know, and if they had viewed that person doing something good for somebody else, they would write them, I saw you, I caught you doing something really nice, great job, my name is Matt and I live in 302, right? So just wanted to say, hey, and keep up the good work in our community, or something like that, right? So the RA had mailed the instructions along with an extra card and put them in everybody's mailboxes, and then they were able to write some nice things down and switch them around and send them to different people, or do some nice things on people's door boards and what have you, right? The RA had facilitated it. She didn't do it, she facilitated it. She didn't direct it. It wasn't something that everyone came to, that it was something that just kind of happened. She facilitated the idea and let it go, right? So those are passive programs. Still takes a lot of work, still takes a lot of forethought and planning, but it's not a one-time you all come to the lounge kind of program. Now, the RA did follow up with a planned program, or a more active program, if you will, where she invited the whole floor to come in and just kind of meet each other, because even though somebody got a nice note, they might feel still kind of weird about meeting that person. And it was an opportunity to say, hey, I'm Matt, or hi, I'm Megan, or whatever, and thanks for the note, right? And maybe have some ice cream or something. So those are passive programs. And the last are sponsored programs. And sponsored programs are those programs that are probably the easiest programs to do. And although they're the easiest, I'm not advising you to do all of them as this. But sponsored programs are those that are sponsored by the school. So like the Star Wars movie with the characters that came in, or a hypnotist, or maybe it could be a lunch on Friday you all attend together, or another speaker that comes in the evening that you all go to, and then maybe facilitate some conversation afterwards. These are planned events by the college that you can just gather a bunch of residents and take them to, right? We've known RAs who have done that quite a bit, and they're really meant to help develop community on your floor or in your hallway. And so those are easy kind of community builders when you're getting everybody to come to. So the next question about, how do I plan this? Is there some kind of guide to help me through this? And there is. So Chickering's 7 Vectors, Chickering is a student development theorist, and he came up with 7 vectors, which is kind of nice. The theories are generally like step theories, so you kind of accomplish one step before moving on to the next step, right? Well, Chickering's vectors are very different than that. I mean, they're kind of like, the best way I can describe it is like the solar system, right? Whereas you are kind of or the student is kind of the sun, right? And planets orbit around the sun. Well, these vectors kind of orbit around the student. And what's nice about this theory is that it really it really speaks to the fact that people are develop at different in different areas at different times and in different paces, right? And so all these areas, these 7 vectors, people could be jumping in and out of all the time. So it's nice that there's some flexibility in student in when and how students develop, because again, you are trying to look at the issues of 28, 30 students, right? So this is a nice flexible way to be able to look at that. And the other nice thing is that there are 7 programming months in the year, so that kind of coincides together and makes it pretty nice, right? So I'm going to go through these really quick just so folks understand. Developing competence is the first vector, and that's really just about learning something new or learning more about something that you already know, right? So, and that can cover a lot of ground. It can cover intellectual growth, and cover physical fitness or physical growth or interpersonal growth, right? Is learning something new or gaining more knowledge about something you already know. The next thing is managing emotions, and this goes with coping with disappointment or anxiety and depression even, right? And so what we know about first-year students is that this is a big transition year for folks, right? And so not only just work-wise, but also their first time away from home. Maybe they had a high school relationship that kind of went south, right? Or is starting to go south as they're further away from one another. Could be a number of different things, but managing emotions, that vector is really there to kind of think about how you can help folks manage those feelings, right? We've all kind of fell into that self-doubt category, right? When we, because most of you all were kind of the art kids in high school, right? And you were really good artists. And here you're amongst a lot of really good artists, right? And so sometimes that can be off-putting for first-year students, and there can be a lot of self-doubt. And so managing emotions is there to kind of work through those types of interpersonal issues, and then also just personal issues, right? Or intrapersonal issues. Moving through autonomy toward interdependence. This assumes that as a young kid you were dependent on your parents, and as you started getting older and moving into adolescence, you began to gain more autonomy. You found a job, or you started driving, and maybe you're going out on dates, or hanging out with friends, and you weren't with your parents all the time, right? So you were establishing some autonomy. Well, moving toward interdependence is taking autonomy one step further, right? It's understanding that that it's just not all about you, right? As we know, if you have younger siblings who are young teenagers or tweens, if you will, sometimes they can be very how do I put this delicately? It can be it's all about them, right? Because they're learning how to establish themselves. They're learning how to deal with autonomy. As college students, you're learning to deal with interdependence. So it's not just about you, but it's about everybody, right? And you fitting in, you being just a puzzle piece, if you will, to a much larger world. So again, it's just kind of a next step in you becoming dependent on yourself, right? In the world of in the much greater world. The next is developing interpersonal relationships, and again, this is not just intimate relationships, but these are just relationships changing, right? The relationship that you have with your parents changes. The relationship in college, the relationship you have with your siblings, with other friends, with intimate partners, right? I mean, those relationships are starting to change, right? We get a lot of first-year students who go home for the first time, and maybe they have friends who didn't go away to school and just stayed home. Well, sometimes those friends are still kind of stuck. Oh, I wouldn't say stuck, but they're still kind of living life how they always lived. And students who go away to school, they're living a different life. And so sometimes it's a shock to kind of come back to home and feeling different, right? And having to deal with those feelings. But developing mature interpersonal relationships is, how you talk with, like I said, how you talk with your parents, how you talk with each other, how you talk with your faculty members, how you talk with me, right? So developing mature interpersonal relationships covers a lot of ground that way. Establishing identity. And this has a lot to do with, like yourself, right? And who you want to be, how you want to be seen, the kind of artist you want to be, right? The kind of person you want to be. And this is when, a lot of students go away to college and they maybe get a tattoo, or they color their hair, or they get a nose piercing or something like that, right? They do something in, moving toward interdependence, or just moving, toward who they want to be and establishing themselves. They do some things like that, right? So programming wise, it could be about tattoos, right? It could be about piercings, it could be about finding your own sense of self, feeling comfortable with you, yourself, and your body, your sexuality, your gender. It could also go to talk about critiques, right? How others view you, or how others view your work. I mean, since art, your art is such a personal thing, right? Understanding the feedback of a critique, right? And trying not to make it too personal or take it too personally. Establishing identity. Developing purpose is a great vector when you're talking about what you want to see yourself in 5 years. Like establishing identity is kind of who you want to be now, right? Developing purpose is where you want to be in 5 years, or where, the whole interview question of where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, developing purpose is thinking about and being cognizant of the fact that at the end of college you're going to have to get a job, right? Or there's going to be a career there, hopefully, for you. And what do you want that career to be like, right? Do you have aspirations to have a family, right? Do you want to stay in Cleveland, which I would always push for? I mean, it's a great city, but where do you want to live? How do you want to live? Those are those things that, when developing purpose, we start to think about, right? So programmatically, it could be putting your resume together, finding an internship in the summer, understanding major selection, right? Selecting your major. And the last vector is developing integrity. And this has to go with beliefs, values, right? As well as thinking about others that you see. I mean, the residence hall is such a great laboratory for discussion and differences of opinion, right? It's a great social experiment, right? We have roommate issues surrounding some of these issues that come up, or some of these things that come up. But certainly, you as a person, you are, while you're establishing your identity, you're thinking about who you want to be as a person, right? What are the values that you hold? Are they the same or different from your families, from your parents, right? How you were raised? Those opportunities for you to think of different things or see different worldviews is important. And so developing integrity is one of those things where you are able to take the opportunity to think about who you really want to be, right? Or to start to think about who you want to be and how you relate. And again, you're that being just a puzzle of the greater world, right? So the requirements, they're pretty straightforward. Each RA must do one program a month and cover each of the 7 vectors during the course of the school year. Your RD will help you with that, and will certainly help guide you through those 7 vectors each month. And additionally, you have to do a bulletin board. I tend to like to have the programs correspond with the vector that you're covering, But that's not necessarily a must. And so what I'd ask you to do, if you're thinking about doing something different than your different vector than the bulletin board is covering, that you talk with your hall director about that, and just to make sure that you're good to go and you stay on track. So while we're talking about bulletin boards, a bulletin board is a dynamic opportunity for you to educate students, right? This bulletin board, is one of those things where it talks about decreasing your stress. Now, I know RAs always worry about their bulletin boards and the amount of work that they put into their bulletin boards and somebody disrupting it, right? Well, that's going to happen from time to time. That also should tell you that people are reading it and are interacting with it. But a bulletin board is meant to educate, right? And so it's good that it goes and it coincides with your vectors, right? Because it's meant to educate. It's meant to be descriptive, right? Easy to read, not a lot of text, visually appealing, right? Needs to be eye-catching. I just thought this bulletin board was pretty awesome. I was like, man, I never really thought about doing it like that, but that's so cool. And so, but it's meant to be eye-catching, right? You want somebody to stop and take a look at the bulletin board. And believe me, I look at bulletin boards every month. I walk the building. They are due by the 15th of every month. And on the 15th of every month, one of the first things I do is walk over to both Uptown and to 115 and look at bulletin boards. I think they're really important, and I think it's an opportunity for you both to express yourself creatively and to educate students in a really unique way. So, a helpful guide when you're thinking about programming is to ask yourself a couple questions. The first is, what is my outcome for this? What am I hoping to achieve by this? Is it something that my residents have talked about needing, right? Or is it something that my residents are talking about, and am I providing something that they're needing? The other thing is that you think about, how much am I spending on this program? How do I, each of you will be given a budget. And so how do I stay on budget with the program, my programming? How do I make that money last throughout the whole year and still achieve the goals that I have, right? And last but not least, is this program and what I'm talking about doing, is this an example of my best effort? Because remember I talked about at the beginning, is it something that you're just going through the motions about, or is it something that you really are passionate about, and the way in which you're presenting it is you're passionate about that? So when you're thinking about proposing a program, how should you go about doing that? Well, I kind of have these backwards, but first thing I would do if I were you is I would write it all down, right? When you're writing down the kind of an idea, ask yourself, does this idea sound doable? Right? Does it sound like an idea that I can pull off? For example, like if you wanted to go skydiving, right? We need a plane and we need parachutes. Well, that's two things that CIE doesn't have. So is it really doable, right? So you have to make sure that you are thinking practically. The second thing is, does it have a purpose? Right? What's the purpose? What are my outcomes that I'm looking for? Right? The next thing is, what are the specifics to pull it off? Like, what are those? Think about the steps that you would need to take in order for the program to be successful. And then not only the steps, but what are the materials? Like, what do you need for it to be successful? And can we afford it? Do we have it? And is it feasible to do it, right? So you got to think about all the logistic pieces, have that all ready to go. And then the next thing I would do is during your one-on-ones with your hall director, I would sit down and talk about programs that you're thinking about, right? Your hall director can give you some really good advice about whether or not they see the program that you're putting in place is doable. They can ask you more questions about its intended purpose. about specifics that have you thought about this, or do you have access to this? All those specific things that you would need to make it successful. Okay. Other things that I would do is I would talk about your ideas at staff meetings. After you kind of go around and talk about what's going on your floor, talk about programming, right? A lot of good ideas get generated in this way, and certainly a lot of logistics get help, because you might have another RA who's like, you know what, I have students who are going through the same thing on my floor. Can we work together, right? And my answer to that would be yes, you all can work together, just as long as you're serving the needs of your specific floor in some way. I would make sure that it's mixed up and make sure that you do some that are just particularly for your floor, but I'm not going to shy away from good teamwork. And the last thing I would do is I would talk it over with your residents. They can give you the best feedback about if it's something that they're looking for or if it's something that they need, right? They can give you all the good feedback. It's like when I want to know what RAs are looking for, I'm going to go to you all and I'm going to ask you more questions about what it is that you're looking for out of some of the things that our office gives you. So that question about how do I know if it's something that my residents are going to like? Well, if you're doing a good job community-wise, right? If you are engaging with your residents, they know who you are. You're walking around with them. You're hanging out with them in the lounges. You're going to have a good idea about what they're going to like and what they won't like. One of the reasons you guys are perceptive people. One of the reasons why we hired you was your perception of what, having good perception skills, if you will. So just like this, I love these Tumblr things, where you're an RA win on Tumblr. And this is number 187. If it takes you twice as long to get anywhere because of all the residents you stop to chat with, those are good signs. Like that is good work by RAs who are building good communities. And those good communities will give you as much feedback as you're looking for, and sometimes more than you're looking for. Okay? So don't feel, I want you all interacting with your residents and building community, because I think only through that you will understand what your residents are into. So once you spend that money, how are you going to get it back? Well, one, whenever you go out to purchase something, you need to make sure that your purchase is tax exempt, right? So food is tax exempt already. However, paper products like plates, napkins, cups, forks, spoons, that kind of stuff, pop, like soda, is not tax exempt. And so you're going to need to get a tax exempt form for whatever store you're going to. That could be Constantino's, that could be Barnes & Noble, that could be Target, Walmart, you name it. You're going to need to have some sort of tax exempt form. CIA, and specifically our office, has already has tax exempt status with Walmart, with Packetans, and with Amazon. So if you need to buy something from one of those three, you just need to see your hall director, and your hall director can give you the tax exempt card from each one of those places that you need to go to. The next thing is that you need to submit your paperwork. It's so important for you to hold on to your receipts, right? Without receipts, I can't reimburse you. And if it has tax on it, I can't reimburse that either. But certainly without a receipt, I can't reimburse you at all, right? And that's the way the school knows that you actually made a purchase. And so you need to submit your paperwork, and that includes your receipt as well as expense forms, right? And your hall director can help you fill those out. If their hall director's not around, I'd be more than happy to do that. And your reimbursement will be sent to you in about a week. Typically, they are sent to you electronically, but it's just as a transfer, and so to your bank account. But what's nice is that if you have your stuff in by Tuesday, you will get your money back by Friday, which I think is a pretty quick turnaround for most businesses. So, rest assured, if you get your stuff in, you're going to get your money back pretty quickly. So what happens after you have done your program and you've turned in your paperwork to get reimbursed? Well, After the program, we'd want you to fill out an evaluation form, right? And that includes talking with your residents to garner some feedback from them about your program, whether you thought it was successful or not. And I think you can get some good feedback from that, right? That helps you to be a better programmer. And then once you fill out your evaluation form, your hall director can talk to you about that during your one-on-ones. And I think you become a better programmer through those types of conversations. So before training, one thing I would want you to do is, think about the issues that you went through as a first-year student, and just jot them down. Put them in a sketchbook, right, with a square around them, right? And those issues, I think, you think about those issues; those help frame the conversation. That's why I said put a box around it. You get it. I know the jokes are good, but you think about those kinds of issues that you went through, because generally those are going to be the kinds of issues that most students will go through, right? The next thing that I would want you to do is read more about the vectors and take that list of issues and kind of overlay them with the vectors to try to figure out where those issues lie, right? Because one of the things that we're going to talk about during training is we're going to do some of that work, right? We're going to talk about some of those issues. I'm going to have you, bring them back up, and we're going to talk about where they most appropriately lay within the vectors, right? And how to best go about putting those on. One of the reasons why I want you to do this presentation prior to is trying to kind of give you some good background for those conversations. But I would also want you to read more about them, right? And if you didn't want to read more about them, you could also just YouTube it, because there's lots of really good videos about the vectors on YouTube that could really just give you some very good, entertaining ideas about the vectors and what they're all about, okay? And last but not least, I would go to residentassistant.com. It's a great resource for RAs, from everything from bulletin boards to programming to issues that they're seeing on their floor, and allowing other RAs to kind of talk those problems out. I think it's a great resource for RAs, and it even has stuff about how to put it on your resume, right? The RA experience on your resume. So it's a great tool for RAs to use, and so I would encourage you to do the same thing. So with